big boards for bigger waves. So I got these about a year and a half ago, and we had a big El Nino season. So this is the X is one season in, so these are all painted out through that season. And now the North Pacific's come alive again. And so these boards are sick, and they're gonna get back into action here pretty quick. So these marks are all gestural. Well, first off, Torquato character. That's the voice inside of you that says, yes, you can. All the gestural marks are more just tribal, emotional outbursts that kind of balance out your energy when you're in that big energy in the ocean. You kind of have to bring that to it to be a part of it. So all the prep, all the getting ready physically, mentally, emotionally, all that is what this is. So that time I'm there, I feel like I've done my work and I'm ready. So that's part of the prep on this. Like I said, the X is one season in. So we'll see how many, by the end of this board's life, we'll see how many X's it has. These are all from the Rhythms and Hues series. So these all come from when I had my studio in the Pacific Palisades, and I was listening to, living in the environment of the ocean. And so I would go to sleep listening to the waves coming in, and same within the morning, and start to realize that nature, like us in humans, we move in rhythms and patterns. So that's what these paintings are about. They're tracing rhythms and patterns that reflect the waves in the ocean, the tides, our heartbeats, natural rhythms. One thing that's interesting about these is within these patterns is the glassy surface. It's resin, it's surfboard resin. So most of what I do reflects upon nature and being immersed in nature, and a lot of that takes place through surfing. So the materials, I use these same paints on my surfboards, use the same resins on my paintings. So it's kind of a world of materials and influences, and they all mix together. This piece is from a series called A Season at Sea. And so it follows suit with the rhythms and patterns, but sitting from the hillside, watching the storms approach the coast over a whole season from fall through spring, I made sketches, cut them up, and put them into these rhythms and patterns, but this is more abstracted because it's several paintings of those rhythms and patterns, then cut up and reassembled. These 9 are from a series, a much greater series called Abstracting Freedom. And so these are, I call these Implode Explode, and it's really isolating specific moments. And in this instance, when a large wave breaks on your head and basically everything is smashed, there's a moment where there's a bit of clarity, where you see everything and it's crystal clear and it's frozen in your mind. So there's a lot of movement, but if you look, there's real finite pencil and ink and such to really help define that specific moment. So this is my Torquato character. Torquato is my middle name. If you look it up, it's not defined. So when I created this character, later I gave him my middle name, which is Torquato, and I defined him as an action hero. So Torquato represents the voice inside of each of us that says, yes, you can. So the whole branding behind this character is, I am Torquato. So as soon as you say the brand and say, I am Torquato, once you say that, then you own that voice inside of you, and whenever you're up against anything challenging, that's the little voice inside you that says, yeah, I got this. This board goes all the way back to the year 2000. The design, if you look at the channels, at the time it was super high performance. And it made the boards work really good, but it made them really frail, so they didn't last long. But this board was a point in my life where I went from competing and pushing my own performance to stepping back and saying, top performances weren't winning in contests. So I came up with a game called the 5x, which is, before we even had the logos, it was the Red Bull 5x or the RB5X. And it looked at surfing as more of a creative endeavor than just a sport. And so it was more about high performance and expression than just beating another guy. So on this is kind of a whole revival of this board from 2000. To me, these are more like totemic things that you build upon, structures that you build upon. And for this board going from literally year 2000 to 2016, there's all these things that we've learned and built upon. And so it's just kind of a hit of the progress from that time with the game, the 5x, up until now. This show has works from previous, where my studio was for 20 years on the west side, and then I've been downtown for a year and a half, and so there's a significant shift in the work, and it's based on the environment. So I went from listening to organic nature, ocean, to where now I live across the street from a cement factory, I live on the railroad tracks, I live immersed in downtown LA. And so in these, you see the hard lines of the streets, the railroad tracks, those kinds of patterns mixed with more of the organic flow. And that's really kind of my interpretation of trying to find a natural flow while being in the city with all the buildings and the grids and the railroad tracks and the signs, the sounds. I went from listening to the ocean to where now I listen to a cement factory and railroads, and they're mechanical and they're constant, and it's a different take to the senses. This is another one of the resin works, and this one comes from that organic environment, being closer to the ocean. And one of my favorite artists growing up was Miro, and he used to paint his dreams, and he felt that if you were to paint your dreams or you were to paint your enemy, then you could own it and it would no longer affect you. So if you had a nightmare, the ritual was to paint it, to bring it to life, and it couldn't affect you. So my neighbor across the street, as I was doing these abstract paintings, she came down, she had breast cancer. And so that means a lot to a lot of people, and it's an emotional time, and you don't know what the outcome of those things is. You can hope for the best, etc. But in painting this, as I was painting it, I started to see the shape of a woman's figure with a jawline and a breast and a hip. And the more that came to life, for me, that painting started to have more meaning, and this kind of looks like a rose or a nipple. And so as all of that started to come to life, I sealed it in resin and finished it. And luckily, she is a full cancer survivor, and she's healthy, and I'm happy to report. But that was kind of that, drawing on that reference of Miro and having that thing that haunts you. And if you manifest it, then you can own it. And once you own it, it can't affect you. I get to travel a lot, and I travel around the world chasing waves. And it takes me to some pretty amazing places, and along the way, I like to photograph and draw and sketch, but I collect little objects. So things that catch my eye and in these remote environments that really resonate as being special. And so like here, this is actually a bit of the reef from Barbados. There's pieces from Mexico, from Fiji, or even metal here that's been digested by nature. So things that are really weathered and raw and reflect nature. This table is titled Good Morning Crabby. So again, pieces of nature that you come across that resonate. They're all locked in with resin. Shells from beaches from around the world, bits of wood, bits of grain. In fact, some of these weaving materials in Samoa, these are the materials that the women use to weave the baskets. And so it's finding those organic, raw elements and then reinterpreting them and putting them into these pieces. And that's where this whole series starts, from those materials. John Baldessari wrote, "I will not make any more boring art." And so I took that and applied that to surfing, and I wrote, "I will not waste good waves." So that's kind of the mantra of, when you get a wave, you're not gonna blow it, you're gonna go off. Witch doctors in Colgate. I was just in northern Sumatra in this village where a guy got a spider bite, and it got infected and it was gnarly, and he went into town, and the only doctor there was the witch doctor and bartender. And so he waved these, he said he waved some sticks over his head, and he said some words, and they took out some Colgate and shoved it in the spider bite, and said he should wake up in the morning and be fine. But he woke up in the morning and the infection was super, super bad, so he had to take a 14-hour boat ride to the hospital and get it fixed. So these are actually made from the bottom side of a specific kind of ping pong table. So the flip side is a plain surface. Yeah, it's a brand called Kettler out of Germany. And I found these because I was using the ping pong table as my painting surface, but the salt air rusted out. So when I took it apart, I thought this was interesting. I started making paintings out of the panels. So each dimple is an individual painting, and when you look back, it looks like a color field, as if you were staring into the sun and then close your eyes and everything's pixelated. That's where these paintings start to make sense. This piece, Life Raft. So there's 8 surfboards roped and twined together into what would physically be a life raft. But each of these surfboards you see is painted, and I get my surfboards white, which we call clear, and then I paint on them, I ride them, I travel, and throughout their lives there's a history within each of these boards of experiences all around the planet with friends and competitions and adventure.